All right, let's take this conversation further. The National Treasury under pressure as it faces the tough task of finding ways to balance its books from a weak economy, skyrocketing debt and the persisting power cuts. The Finance Minister is going to have to walk a tightrope in his budget speech tomorrow. Well, for more on what we can expect, I'm joined now by Dr Nombeko Mbava, chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. Dr. Mbava, good evening to you, and thank you for your time. I think it was the Business Maverick I was reading this afternoon, which really summed it up very tightly, the situation we face when it comes to our finances. And they're saying we have a stagnating economy, a ballooning wage bill, and compounded by the fact that there is a struggling tax base. Basically, we're not collecting enough taxes. So, with that said, the Minister of Finance is going to have to do some balancing act here. Is he likely to avoid bailing out these dysfunctional SOEs, and key among them, Transnet?
Thank you so much, Polly, and good evening to all the viewers at home. Indeed, it's going to be a balancing act because the environment, starting first with the global economic environment, it remains elevated in terms of high risks, the geopolitical risks that we face. These have an impact on our own economy because through supply chain systems, the cost of fuel, the cost of food, so inflation, those are going to be challenges that we're going to face going forward. But looking now at our own domestic economy, what needs to be done? The problem is that we still have fiscal risks that we face. You'll remember that we bailed out Eskom not so long ago for a tune of 250 million rands. And also, we know that Transnet is facing challenges. And we know that in the SONA speech, the president was very emphatic to say that the logistics system remains a challenge and that Transnet remains a binding constraint to economic growth. So one of the key issues then for the minister is to sort out that problem, to say what can be done to actually open up the logistics system and the infrastructure. The second issue that we need to deal with is the runaway debt. So debt service costs as a line item in the budget now exceed the basic education budget. So it means that now if we do not put in place measures to contain that, debt service cost will actually eat away the money that is available to spend on development. So what government has done then, you will remember, Oli, is that there was a memo which was issued to all the government departments to say that they need to cut their spending. This is part of government's plan, which is called fiscal consolidation. Essentially, fiscal consolidation means that we reduce the budget deficit, and also we want to reduce the stock of debt as a country. So all government departments then, on a 3-year term, were asked to reduce their budgets. That has been done by many government departments, essentially to fund the wage bill. But we still do not know now that the cuts that we have been asked to implement, where is that money going?
Exactly.
Is this going to be money that will be used for further bailouts? Because if that is the case, it means that the fiscal consolidation path that we are on is not properly focused, because fiscal consolidation must have a purpose. So if it's to reduce the debt, then that money must go to that rather than go into bailing out further failing state-owned entities.
Yeah. That debt to GDP ratio is something that we are going to have to watch very closely, Dr. Mbava. The unemployment rate shooting up again in the fourth quarter, 32.1% is where it currently sits. Is it fair to conclude that we are going to see yet another extension of the social relief of distress grant, that 350 rand? And if so, where is that money going to come from?
Exactly. Where is that money going to come from? But before I answer your question, the IMF has projected that our growth rate for the 2024 fiscal year is about 1.8% of real GDP. As one of your previous interviewees commented, it's not enough to grow the economy. So it's not enough to absorb the number of young people who are jobless at 32.1%, as has been indicated today. So we need more robust and higher growth rates. But the question is, how do we get there? Because there are competing demands on the fiscus. One of them is what you have just mentioned, the SRD grant. You remember that in the two previous budget statements that the minister has made, he has promised that he will come back to the South African public with a permanent solution, which is supposedly a basic income grant. We still do not know how is that going to be funded, what is going to be the volume of that, and where is it going to come from. So because it's an election year as well, as you say, you want to appease the voters. So it is possible that the minister can extend the SRD grant, because those voters are very, very crucial right now.
Yeah, and if indeed that SRD is going to be extended, I was reading up on the numbers. We're told that some 44 billion rand per year is what is costing the taxpayer to keep up with the 350 rands. So you mentioned the election year, the public sector wage bill, always a contentious issue, because we have one of the highest salary bills as a country. How do you think government is going to approach the salary negotiations, keeping in mind that we are in an election year, meaning that word you used, appeasement?
Well, the current budget cuts that were mandated for all government departments to implement was precisely for that, to fund the public service wage bill at the expense of many, many other competing programs of government. Or one of them is the doctors who need to go into rural areas. So that rural program for doctors was actually slashed. So those doctors couldn't even go to the rural environments to actually practice their craft. So it has an impact. Now, the problem as well is that we borrow this money in the money market. Remember, we have a deficit going. So when we actually allocate the budgets, we borrow some of the money from the money market. And then we give it to these government departments to actually spend. For instance, the social development. We've given them numerous amounts of money, but they've sent it back to the fiscus. Now, is that savings? We have maintained as the FFC, the Financial and Fiscal Commission, that is not savings, because we are borrowing at money market rates, and then the departments leave these huge amounts of millions and billions of rands in their bank accounts to attract some sort of interest as a saving. But if you compare the interest that they actually earn on the unspent allocation versus the interest that government actually is going to pay to the bond holders who actually borrowed government, is actually much less. So who's actually benefiting from this? It's the banks, because the banks now, they can use those idle funds to lend them out again. Yeah. So the message that must be, we need to find 44 billion rands to fund the SRD, but where is that money lying? It's lying in the government departments who are inefficient because we have what we call fiscal leakages. So if we spend what we are supposed to spend, then we'll be able to actually have inefficiencies and lose a lot of money through the system. So there is money in the system. The first part of it is to actually spend the allocated money. Otherwise, government will continue to pay high interest rates on allocations that are made to government departments which do not even spend that money. And therefore, it's actually an opportunity lost or an opportunity cost to government.
Two quick questions, Doctor, before we conclude. NHI, do you expect anything substantial to be announced there in the way of allocations?
There was a mention of the NHI in the SONA. Remember, the SONA is a precursor to what the minister will actually announce, because the SONA are the policy priorities. Yes. So there was a mention of NHI, and the NHI is going to be implemented over a period of time. So initially, there is some funding that is required to get the system going. So there might be some allocations towards that. It is possible. But what is most we can be sure of is that the minister will either speak about a rise in taxes. Remember what we talked about initially. We said fiscal consolidation. Mm-hmm. There are two parts to it. Either you hike your taxes or you cut your spending. We have been cutting the spending. Now the other side of the coin is to hike the taxes. So we might have a VAT increase, or we could even have a wealth tax increase.
You prompted my last question, because it is on exactly taxes. In an election year, might the Finance Minister avoid this, because it's definitely not going to be a popular move in this kind of environment? But how then does he plug that gap which he announced in his medium-term budget policy statement in October last year, when he said we are short of 15 billion rand because of the less tax collections?
Well, the minister now must report on the fiscal consolidation. Remember, now all the government departments have taken almost a 10% shave on all their allocations. So has some of that money been found now? Then he can maybe top up on that through some sort of increases, I don't know, from the VAT or other avenues. But there is now certainly some revenue which has been found, because many government departments have actually reduced their spending.
Dr. Nombeko Mbava, let me thank you very much for your time and indeed analyzing this for us so clearly. Chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission.